the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia here with Stephen Ruiz and Diante Lee. It is the divisional round preview pod coming up. We will be talking about all 4 games and, of course, making our picks in the season-long contest. Ruiz, how we feeling? 4 games this weekend, 2 games the following weekend, 1 game 2 weeks after that.
Oh, I'm excited. Bills Ravens. I've been waiting, 4 months for this one. And I'm not sleeping on these other matchups either. I'm kind of excited for Texans and Chiefs. We'll get into why that is. Commanders Lions should be fun with those offenses. And Rams Eagles. I really don't know what to expect in that one. I think the Eagles have a massive advantage, but you can never count the Rams like we did against Minnesota.
Diante, maybe an upset or two. We're all going to make the case,
It's entirely possible. I think that there are so many stylistic clashes with some of these games, and that's probably a big reason why the lines are a little out of whack for what you might expect in a divisional round of the playoffs. But I think that with what we're going to be podcasting about today, there are a lot of different ways that these games can swing outside of just what we know to be the top storylines coming in.
I honestly feel like that's why playoff football is so good. It's not just the stakes. I just think first of all, the sport of football, I think it's just better when teams know each other and they've played each other and they can, focus in on stopping each other and exposing each other's weaknesses. And I can't wait to see what these teams have planned for one another and how these games kind of manifest themselves on the field and how they play out. It's going to be exciting.
And this one game, NBA, you can come up with a great game plan, but you use it in game 1. No, game 2, they know it's coming. Now there is only 1 game here. So we've got 4 games, obviously, to get to. We're going to start with Ravens-Bills because that is a obviously competitive game, 1.5 point line. But then we have some bigger lines. And Ruiz had the good idea. He said, let's make the case for the dogs here. We don't want to just come on and say, Eagles are better. Chiefs are better. No, so we each took one of the underdogs here, and we're each going to make the case for why they can win the game. So we'll get to that here in a minute. But we start with Ravens at the Bills. And Diante, you had the idea we know the quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. We will get to them. But you thought, let's discuss the ways these 2 teams can win outside of the quarterback, which I loved. So let's start there. Go ahead, take either team, take both teams, whatever you want, how these teams can win aside from their quarterbacks being elite, among the best in the NFL.
To me, I think that this game is going to swing on how Buffalo defends the run. I think that was a big reason why the game got away from them so early in their week 4 matchup. And I think this is actually something we talked about in the preview show going into that game, which is that Buffalo was very rigidly kind of adherent to playing with 5 defensive backs on the field, almost no matter what an offense is trying to do to them with personnel. And I just think that makes them a tough matchup when you're talking about comparing them to the Ravens offense, especially what they've been since the bye week. I think coming out of that late bye week, they've really been leaning into their 2 tight end sets. They've been leaning more into using Pat Ricard. And I think that those are the ways in which they kind of expose Buffalo's run defense, which has been good over the course of the season, but just, I think, struggles with heavy bodies on the field. You got 180 yards on 20 carries on first down when they played in the first game. To me, if this game looks anything like what it did at the end of September when they matched up, it's going to be on the back of Derrick Henry just being a battering ram on first down and controlling the game and the tempo of it in Baltimore, basically being able to play on schedule all game as a result.
To your point, I think this game comes down to if Sean McDermott can kind of change. I know it's something we've kind of been talking about all season long, how this defense is set up to be successful during the regular season, but during the playoffs, he has gotten exposed by better quarterbacks who can see this defense that's not really a moving target. You know what you're going to get from them. You know they're going to try to out-execute you. And can you play? I think the Bills have been trying to play a little more man coverage and mix things up over the last 2 years, but I think this game is really going to test them. And to your point, when we saw them play in week 4, the Ravens were running the ball. They had Pat Ricard on the field, and they were just gashing the Bills in the ground game. You saw the Bills kind of come out of that 2 high shell they're kind of known for, start playing a little more single high, taking a safety and putting them in the box, whether it was after the snap or before the snap. And what did the Ravens do? They just started involving Lamar Jackson in those reads. They added number to the run box, and you can't account for that. And I feel like that's why I'm kind of bullish on Baltimore in this matchup. Is I feel like Buffalo, both of these offenses are dynamic, But I don't know if Buffalo's run game is nearly as dynamic as Baltimore's, not only because of who they have next to Lamar Jackson in the backfield and Derrick Henry, but also because you have Lamar Jackson. I think they could just run so many different styles of specifically run plays, like different styles of run plays, and they can just keep looking for a way to run on Buffalo until they find one, until Buffalo's defense breaks. And I don't think Buffalo necessarily has that on their side of the ball when they have it.
Yeah, this is really this is the reason you get Derrick Henry game. You're going up against a great quarterback. You're on the road, formidable opponent, but that opponent is set up or has been built or is structured to stop the pass. They want to play nickel. It's the old, Chip Kelly during my early beat writing days. Big people beat up little people was one of his early famous answers. And that's really a lot of what this comes down to. I'm with you guys. I have looked for reasons to pick the Bills, and I guess we will pick every game here as we go along. That is the hardest thing to get past. It's just like, what's their plan? They're going to play more base. They're going to load the box. Like, how are they actually outside in the cold going to stop this Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry run game? Because pretty much no one has been able to do it. So that's absolutely a feather in the Ravens cap there. So the Bills side of this, the case for the Bills being competitive, they're 1.5 point underdogs at home. Ruiz, what does it look like if we come out of this game saying, well, we thought the Ravens were going to run all over them, but the Bills actually did X, Y, and Z, and they were able to win this game?
I think one, they're at home, and that changes everything, especially on the defensive side when it comes to like getting off the ball, the types of pass rushes you can have. I think that changes a lot for them. The fact that it's cold, I think, I don't know who that gives an advantage to just because of Derrick Henry. If Derrick Henry wasn't there, I would side towards it giving an advantage to Buffalo. And I think there's just going to be game pressure. Like we tend to look at these things like on paper. You can't account for the fact that Baltimore has so much riding on this. Lamar Jackson has so much riding on this, and there's in their offense. And I'm sure Todd Monken and everyone that was there last year against the Chiefs is thinking about this game and like, man, this can't be the year we blow it. If we blow it this year, are we ever going to do it? Like, that's going to affect this game. And I don't know if the game is going to play out like we can expect it to play out on paper. Like maybe Derrick Henry fumbles once or twice. Maybe Lamar Jackson fumbles. Maybe the offensive line gets dominated after we've seen it kind of bully lighter defenses. I think those are the things you can't account for. And then the other part of it is they have Josh Allen. And as long as you have Josh Allen, you have a chance of scoring 40. And if you score 40, you can beat anybody in the NFL. And we've seen this Ravens defense be victimized, especially with those deep passes. And we saw Josh Allen, the only time he was really to create those big plays against the Ravens was when he got outside of the pocket. That's the case for it. I just don't think Baltimore has to adjust too much to what they typically do on defense to account for what Buffalo does. Whereas the other side, which we already explained, I do think Buffalo is going to have to change their MO to handle what the Ravens do, not only in the ground game, not only in like the traditional ground game, but the option ground game too, the RPO game, the play action game, the drop back game, everything that the Ravens can do. Buffalo can do a little bit of that, but I think the Ravens are just better set up on defense to deal with that without making changes.
So
I think to me,
reasons,
if you're...
Go ahead, Diante.
I'm sorry, Sheil. No, I think to me, there's a big... One of my picks, and I think this is actually going to end up being a big matchup in this game, is going to be Khalil Shakir versus Marlon Humphrey. I think that's going to have a lot to do with how effective Buffalo's passing game can be. I think you can go back and watch the film from that Week 4 matchup, and Baltimore was very comfortable just playing cover one, playing a bunch of man coverage, and they were able to take away a lot of those crossing routes and over routes that we know that Buffalo's offense likes, especially on play actions. That Shakir versus Marlon Humphrey matchup, I think, is going to decide what early downs look like. I'm going with Shakir under 50.5 receiving yards in this game because I am leaning Baltimore. But I will say, if that goes in the other direction and you get to see an explosive Shakir reception, some yak opportunities from him or from Dawson Kincaid on early downs, that to me, I think is going to relieve a lot of pressure, because if you're Buffalo, what you don't want to have to do, and what I'm afraid they're going to have to do, is lean on Josh Allen as a runner to manage the down and distance situations. And I just think that from their perspective, they have built this offense around not necessarily needing him to go into that Cam Newton 2015 to 2017 mode to keep this offense moving. But it's entirely possible that that's the only way they're able to reequate the numbers in the run game if Baltimore is really leaning on them at the line of scrimmage, especially if they're getting a lot of man coverage.
Yeah, that the Ravens' run defense has been very good. There's no doubt about it. Now, I do look at a couple other things for Buffalo here. One is They get 3 players back for this game on defense that didn't play in that first game. Both their starting linebackers in this game, and Taron Johnson, who is one of the keys to their defense and has been one of their best defensive players here over the year. So they are healthier. It is, if we talk about what's changed since that week 4 matchup, getting 3 starters back, specifically 3 guys who have to contribute to stopping the run. I think that's a big deal. And then I've been wondering about this. Are we underplaying the Zay Flowers injury? Like if there is a scenario where this is a close game, the Ravens have to pass the football. Zay Flowers, as of this, has not practiced on Wednesday and Thursday. Does that give the Bills kind of some more flexibility with what they can do with their corners? And last week, the Ravens completed 1 pass to a wide receiver. Or do the Ravens have enough with their tight ends, throwing it to Justice Hill, spreading the ball around like we saw Lamar Jackson do it last week, where you're not concerned about that?
I don't know. Like, Zay Flowers is clearly a good player who, like, when you watch him and you watch his highlights, you're like, yes, this is a very talented player. But, like, I'm not sure he moves the needle that much in terms of changing the results of games. Because I do think there is a little more flash to his game than there is substance at times. And there are times when I think he can kind of hurt the Ravens passing game when he's not on the same page with Lamar Jackson, which I think happens more often than not just because he's a young receiver who hasn't necessarily built up that rapport with Jackson in 2 years. I think we're starting to see that rapport kind of develop with Rashad Bateman this year, and Bateman's emergence when Flowers has been out or hasn't been targeted, I think gives me a little more assurance that I think it will be fine even if Flowers doesn't play or Flowers does play and is limited.
I think it's an issue if Baltimore finds themselves behind in the game script and they're not able to play as much 21, 12 personnel, 22 personnel. The reason why I'm maybe not as concerned is just because they've been so effective out of those personnel groupings on early downs. We may not be faced with more than a handful of snaps where they have to be in spread, where it's a high leverage, obvious passing situation, and Buffalo is playing that tight match kind of quarters coverage. And maybe, Lamar has to extend or throw a ball away or have to deal with pressure late in the down because guys aren't separating. This just comes back to what I opened this with. The only way that really turns out to be a big negative for Baltimore, I think, in this game is if they're not able to run the ball at all, or to Steven's point, if they have some kind of variance work against them in terms of turnovers, or something like that. I don't think that them losing Zay Flowers is nothing. I just think that for this particular matchup, the way that Todd Monk and I imagine is going to approach it, I don't know if Zay Flowers is going to be a focal point in why they were going to win this game, even if you were 100%.
I think another way of putting it is if they need Zay Flowers in this game, it was probably a bad game script for them anyway, and it's probably going bad anyway. But I think on the other side of the ball, I do think one of the things that Buffalo has to do, they have to stay out of second and third and long. This was one of the games where Josh Allen got sacked the most throughout the year. I think he was sacked 4 times in this game. He didn't really get outside of the pocket too much in this one and create big plays, like I said earlier. If they're able to do that and keep them in the pocket and kind of get into third and long and start getting into like their double A gap look, their disguised looks, I think Josh Allen will throw them a football. And as long as they catch the football, I think that could be a big play in this one. He nearly threw an interception to Wiggins in that first game. We know when Josh Allen tries to put on that Superman cape, or has to put on that Superman cape, I should say, that's when he gets a little more reckless with the football. And we even saw in that game, he was just giving his receivers a chance on the outside. And I think the only thing they really found in that game that worked, especially in the passing game, were the vertical isolation routes against Brandon Stevens on the outside. It was like the same side of the field every time in the second half. So I think if they do fall behind the script, we're going to see a more high variance approach by Josh Allen. I think there's a chance that he throws an interception to whether it's Marlon Humphrey or Kyle Hamilton. So I'm going to take the over on Josh Allen's interception total, which is a half.
Wow. There you go.
You know what? Stephen kind of touched upon the last point that I wanted to make in this. And I think that we talked after the Amari Cooper trade that they might have more options to be able to beat one-on-one coverage. And I think that might exist kind of in the abstract. I think that just what we've seen over the course of the season is that, that's not really something that they've leaned upon very much in terms of volume. The air yards are there per target when you look at Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper, but when you look at them on third downs, they're towards the bottom in target share. And a lot of that is because that's not the way that this offense wants to operate. That to me is going to be kind of either a game-breaking factor if they're able to win those high variance balls outside the numbers. They definitely used it in the second half when they first played. But if the results of the passing downs forces them to push the ball down the field, or for Josh Allen to have to hold it and try to take chances against tight coverage outside the numbers, to me, that could be a big issue for this offense. So I'm really interested to see whether or not that's something they attack on early downs when they get more, kind of lax looks or soft zones from Baltimore, and not on third down when you're getting man coverage, simulated pressures, and Josh Allen is going to have to navigate a muddy pocket before trying to throw the ball outside the numbers. That can be a big issue for this offense in this game.
Is this fair to say about Amari Cooper? I feel like he hasn't really become a featured member of the offense. He's more just like a deterrent for defenses. Like if they do this, we can hit him, but he's not necessarily going to command targets, especially on those muddy downs like Diante just alluded to.
Absolutely. When you look at targets and kind of his role, it is not what I expected when they traded for Amari Cooper when we did our pod at that time. I'm more bullish on the Bills offense versus the Ravens defense than you guys are. I need to see a little bit more. I know they got a lot better. They made the changes, like you guys said, in the secondary at that one point in the season, and have been good since then. If you look at some of the teams they've played here in the second half of the season, they haven't exactly been world beaters. And I just feel like Josh Allen in a playoff game here in a big spot. I think even if he has to go at creation mode, you're right. He might make have a turnover here or there. But I do think there are opportunities to hit on explosive plays still against this Ravens defense. And when he can just improvise, I think he's got a great chance to move the football against them.
I do wonder if like the shift they made with Kyle Hamilton, kind of moving him back, playing him more deeper, like kind of hurts him in this matchup just because of how much Buffalo loves like those bubble screens, especially in this first game. I know Buffalo has evolved since then on offense. They're more under center on early downs. But in this first game, they were throwing a lot of bubble screens. It was more of a spread run game. And Kyle Hamilton was just blowing up every bubble screen. And I thought having him around the ball against that style of offense, especially with like Khalil Shakir being such a big part of that out of the slot, like really worked to Baltimore's advantage in that matchup. And I know like they've been better on defense since they moved them back, but I wonder if for this matchup, it hurts them in a little way because they don't have their best defensive player around the ball nearly as often.
Yeah, there's no doubt the Bills have a lot of the short passing game, especially like you mentioned on early downs, try to tackle us, that kind of thing. Now, Ruiz, you had mentioned, how do we set the bar for expectations for these quarterbacks? I think you're trying to avoid faulty narratives for whichever quarterback loses. So explain to me, I guess the premise of that. Where are we allowed to criticize them? What is it stupid to criticize them about? What are the expectations for these two quarterbacks?
Okay, here's where we can't criticize them. If one of these guys falls behind, like let's say Josh Allen is chasing a 16-point lead or Lamar Jackson's chasing a 16-point lead, and they throw interceptions in the second half because they're pushing the ball downfield and they're not taking the coward's way out and just dinking and dunking, we can't bash them for that. We can't be like, oh, they're mistake prone. Oh, they weren't reading the field. No, that's what a good quarterback does in that situation. They push the ball downfield. They're not afraid to throw an interception and affect their stat line. There's a reason why Aaron Rodgers has been so bad at making those comebacks, because I don't think he wants to throw interceptions. He doesn't want them on his stat line. I want these quarterbacks to just leave it out on the field. And as long as I see that, if I see, like, I don't want to leave the game being like, oh, I thought Lamar should have scrambled more, like we said against the Eagles, or like we said against the Chiefs last year. I don't want to be saying, oh, Lamar had these plays that he left on the field. He missed a couple of deep balls. Like, as long as these guys are leaving it out on the field and playing like an A+ game, no one's allowed to criticize them. I know that's not
game is a high bar, though. I'm with you. I like your point. I like that point. That's a good point. If win probability is low, you're trailing, those interceptions, don't then after the game look at the box score and say they threw X interception. So I agree with that. I think if they both play well and one of them loses and it's because one thing then I think it's like, all right, well, there's a lot of scrutiny on that one play. But so I think you're fair there. If one of them plays poorly and their team loses, then I think you can criticize them and you can't say, well, they had a great season and look at X, Y, and Z, because I do think in professional sports, what you do when the stakes are at their highest does matter. I know it's not fair. It's a 1-game sample, and they've been awesome for this many weeks. But I do think it's going to be fair then to criticize them if that's the case.
It depends on how it looks. Like if the offensive line is terrible, if it's like what we saw in the Chargers game, no, we should criticize the offensive line or the play calling and not the pressure on the quarterback. I don't know.
Okay. All right.
I'm trying to protect these guys.
I know you are.
These are two of my favorite quarterbacks. I don't want to spend the next 5 months kind of explaining away why they lost the game because one of them has to lose. Like that's the thing that I think we all have to they can't both win.
Yeah. How they lose matters. Yes. How they perform in a loss matters as well. Now you said last couple things on this game, Ruiz, you said that Lamar has so much riding on this game. Do you think he clearly has more at stake in this game than Josh Allen does? Or do you think it's relatively equal, but a little bit more at Lamar? How do you see that? Because that is part of the narrative talk after this as well.
I mean, I don't think it's fair, but I think it's clear that Lamar has more pressure on him. He's the only one that's really been questioned. Like his long-term viability was questioned before he signed his contract. Those were open questions. Like it was a popular take to question Lamar and whether the Ravens should sign him. I know now it feels like it wasn't, but that was never a question with Josh Allen. And if Lamar Jackson wins this game, he's only 1 game back of Josh Allen in the playoff record standings between those two quarterbacks. It's not like Josh Allen has been tearing up the playoffs. He's 6-5. I think Lamar has 3 playoff wins now and 4 losses, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So he's almost right there with them. So I don't think one of these quarterbacks should feel more pressure, but it clearly is Lamar for whatever reason. I think there are a multitude of reasons why, both things that Lamar Jackson can control on the football field and things that he can't control off the football field.
All right. You agree with that, Diante? More at stake for Lamar here?
There's more at stake for Lamar. I just think it's interesting in this game because I think that Josh Allen is going to be called upon to be more of a ceiling raiser for his offense than Lamar will in this game. At least, if everything stays neutral, everything remaining neutral and both teams playing to the peak of their capabilities in order for both teams, either team to win, I think it calls upon more from Josh Allen on those passing downs than it might from Lamar. That's not to say that they're not asking Lamar to do much, right? You can turn on the tape. This is something I was working on. That's probably on a piece that's probably going to go up at the end of the week. That Lamar is processing at a very elite level. Yeah. And I think that we take that for granted at times because we know what he can do in terms of splash plays. I think that with Josh Allen, what this offense has done is kind of allowed him to kind of be in the passenger seat on early downs, oftentimes dumping the ball off underneath. Obviously the running game, we've talked about them being efficient, even if they're not always explosive. I think that you do that to get to a game like this and cut a guy like Josh Allen loose. He needs to be the great equalizer in this game. I don't think that means he has more to prove. I think that Lamar needs to be able to operate well within the structure of the offense. But I'm interested to see what the storyline is going to be if the Ravens win and Lamar has a sub 200-yard passing day and maybe only 1 touchdown, right? You're going to hear a lot of the yeah buts coming out of this week, even though we all can turn on the tape and understand what he's doing to raise the level of his team. I think especially in comparison to what Josh Allen's going to need to do, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a high volume day for him and us maybe lauding box score watchers lauding his performance in comparison to Lamar. But I think that the narratives are going to lean a little bit more in Jackson's favor if things go well or poorly.
Speaking of, I'm going to sneak this take in there. Watch the Herbert all 22. Didn't play a bad game. 8 out of 10 game.
8 out of 10. All right.
8 out of 10 is aggressive. All right.
There you go.
It's not. If anything, it's low, to be honest with you, with what he was dealing with. But we asked about the quarterbacks, and when you think about it, yes, there is something at stake for both of them when it comes to legacy talk, how they're going to be talked about on First Take or whatever. But really, the stakeholders with more at stake in this game, I would say, are the coaches, because those are the guys that could actually get fired if ownership decides, well, this isn't working and we have this quarterback and we need to maximize this quarterback when we have him. So my question to you guys is which coach can not afford to lose this game out of the two?
I don't think either guy is close to getting fired if they lose this game.
I don't either. I honestly don't even know how much of a reputational hit they'll actually take in terms of the national storyline, unless it's a clear just ass kicking.
They screw something up in a big spot or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Outside of that, I think that both of these guys are in positions where just because of the institutional kind of foundational stuff that they do with the program and how well intertwined they are with the roster building process and all that, I don't think that either of them can be hurt. I do think though, maybe more for John Harbaugh, that if he loses in a game like this, you start looking at the more recent playoff performances and asking some fair questions about what the ceiling is with him as head coach. I just don't know if that necessarily means that either guy is going to be looking over their shoulder in terms of job security going into the next season.
Yeah, I honestly think it might be McDermott, just because he has had some ugly moments in crunch time in some of these games. He's been conservative at the wrong time. Like I'm thinking about the 2021 game against the Chiefs. We saw it against Houston earlier this year, and that became a whole thing. So I do think Bills fans are a little more on edge, kind of. And if McDermott kind of screws this season up where it seems like I know the Chiefs have the 1 seed, but it seems like everything's going in Buffalo's favor, especially when those two teams match up. I think it's going to feel like a missed opportunity. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some irrational reactions to that outcome.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, like you said, if we take a step back, they've been among two of the best teams in the NFL all season long. Like you guys said, one of them has to lose in the divisional round because of the way the bracket is set up here. But I mean, they're both kind of in that keep knocking on the door, and hopefully one of the years you break through. I think, by the way, I think both these quarterbacks, regardless of what happens Sunday, will break through. They're still relatively young when you look at how some quarterbacks age and the success they've had at this stage of their career. So I think they will get there. That will not be a popular take on Sunday night, depending how the game goes, but we shall see. All right, sounds like you both have Ravens. I'm going to take the Bills in this game. I flipped a coin 4,000 times today, and it came up Bills one more time than Ravens. I flip-flopped all week long. I think both offenses are going to move the football. I think both offenses are going to score. I think the Zay Flowers thing could end up being just a little bit bigger of a deal than you guys do if the Ravens have to pass the football and all of a sudden we're looking around saying, Nelson Aguilar, who else are we? All right. So that's the only reason they're at home. They're underdogs. We'll see. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I know the Ravens blew them out in the first game. That was the second time in the last 3 seasons that the Bills with Josh Allen have lost by more than a touchdown. It was a very rare occurrence. It would be very impressive. If the Ravens did that twice to them in this season, that would be more than the rest of the league had done to them in the previous 2 seasons combined. So all the metrics point to this Ravens team being like the best team in the NFL right now. Now they got to go out and take care of business as favorites in Buffalo. All right, let's take a break. We come back. We get to our exercise talking about the other games, and we'll make the case for some of these underdogs. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Let's go over real quick here the picks contest, since we haven't done that so far. We each went 2-1 last week as a group, 6-3. That's pretty good. If you took all our picks last week, you won 6 out of the 9 picks there for the season. Ruiz, 35-22, a 614 winning percentage. I'm at 30-27, 5 games back. Diante is at 29-28, 6 games back. We're all above 500. We still got 3 rounds to go. Diante, we do have to make up some ground here, though. 3 more rounds.
Yeah, we're getting into the danger zone a little bit.
We're getting, I kept saying that, and now I'm like, shoot, we have 9 more picks to make here. But we'll see. Ruiz has earned it. We're not going to make something worth more. We each make 3 picks every week. We'll see how that goes. So as you've heard already, we will make those picks throughout the course of the show. Diante went with, remind me.
I have the Commanders.
The Bills game.
Oh, from the Bills game. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what'd you go with from Bills and
from the
Ravens?
Bills game, I have Khalil Shakir going under 50.5 receiving yards.
Okay. And Ruiz had Josh Allen throwing at least 1 interception, correct?
Right. Yeah.
All right. There we go. All right.
Yep.
First game of the weekend, Texans at Chiefs. Chiefs are 8.5-point favorites, tied for the biggest favorites of any team in this round. Ruiz, you are going to make the case for why the Houston Texans can win this game. The floor is yours.
All right. So far in his career, Patrick Mahomes hasn't lost a lot of playoff games. He's only lost 3 in his playoff career. So we're dealing with the small samples. It would have been
so great if you were like, Mahomes, overrated.
He's a bum. He's a bum. He's 3rd on my quarterback rankings, you know? No, but the only time you've been able to knock out Mahomes, you haven't been able to do it by outscoring him, by beating him in a quarterback duel. In fact, like the 5 best performances against these Chiefs since Mahomes took over by quarterbacks by EPA, Mahomes is 4-1 against them. That includes like Jalen Hurts' crazy Super Bowl. That includes the 2021 shootout with Josh Allen. And that includes a couple of other games that they've played where when you get in a high scoring game and you get in that environment, Mahomes is going to make the plays down the stretch and you probably aren't going to make those plays. But the times he's lost, two of those times, the last two times, which I think are the more instructive ones, because the 2018 loss, I'm not holding against him. It was his first time. He was going up against Belichick. They go down like 30-0 in the first half, and they storm back, and they don't get a touch in overtime.
He didn't even get a chance to get the ball right, yeah.
No, but the common denominator, even if you go back to that New England game, is defenses shutting down Patrick Mahomes. His two worst games are against the Bengals, which when they lost in 2021, and against the Bucs in the Super Bowl. And I think the common theme throughout all of these losses is pressure. Getting pressure and doing it without having to blitz, doing it with 4 and at most 5 rushers. The Patriots did it with zone blitzes. They did it with simulated pressures in 2018. The Bengals, if you remember, they were only really rushing 3. They were dropping 8, and they were still getting sacks with Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. And then the Bucs, of course, everyone remembers that. Patrick Mahomes just running around behind that depleted offensive line for his life, 50% pressure. They only blitzed 9% of the time. So I would argue that out of all these teams in the AFC, that Houston, with their setup on defense, with this defensive line, with those two defensive edges, with that interior defensive line, which we saw dominate LA, and the way that they play defense, sound coverage on the back end, with the D'Amico Ryans defense, they're going to be aligned to everything. It doesn't matter if Andy Reid does his little motions before the snap. If he's flipping the formation, Houston's going to be all over it. They're not going to give up explosives. Their secondary can make plays if you try to test them downfield. And I think they're going to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes all day long unless Andy Reid sells out in some way to stop Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. And if they get pressure on him, we've seen this offense fold when they can't block for Patrick Mahomes. This running game hasn't been that good. And this is a defense that can attack a run game like the one that the Chiefs play. Just simple zone for the most part that the Chiefs are going to run. I honestly think this is a bad matchup for the Chiefs offense. And if Nico Collins and CJ Stroud get hot, I could see them pulling off an upset in Kansas City.
Wow.
My pick I'm not only selling this isn't part of the bit. My pick from this game, I'm picking the Texans plus 8.5.
Wow. Diante, he's going all in. Like, I thought we were doing a little role playing. All right, here's fine. Yeah. Ruiz is putting the money where his mouth is and taking the Texans plus 8.5. Did he make a convincing case for you?
I'm not convinced that the Texans offense has enough answers to keep this game interesting in the second half. I will say, though, that he made the exact point I was going to make. When you've seen the Chiefs offense in playoff scenarios look bad, it's when teams are able to get home with 4 and you start to see Patrick Mahomes press. I would say all those games that Steven brought up qualify. I would even say the first half of the Super Bowl last year when Chase Young was playing really well and Dre Greenlaw was still available to this team and they had an answer for Travis Kelce in the middle of the field, or another answer for Travis Kelce in the middle of the field. You saw Patrick Mahomes look a little worse in those third down situations. And then obviously as the game went on, no Dre Greenlaw, they're able to pick on Oren Burks. He was scrambling a lot more. I think that you saw things kind of come back to more of an equilibrium or more of a style of game that the Chiefs are comfortable with offensively. I just think I would not be surprised, though, if this game looks a lot more like the first half of the Super Bowl and some of those games that Steven was mentioning. I think in their first matchup or in their matchup in the regular season, if I remember right, Hollywood Brown had just come back that week when they were playing. So they had another receiver available to help them beat man coverage. And Houston played more man coverage, at least by rate, on dropbacks than they had at any other point in the season. I think that they'll learn from that. They know they can't play that kind of tight man and allow Andy Reid to get into all those bunches and stacks and run drag routes 1,000 times over and just picking guys off in coverage. I think we'll see more quarters. I think we'll see a little bit more of a mix of zone coverage shells on the back end and trusting that Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter at their best are good enough to be able to apply pressure, even if you're not necessarily finishing plays with hits or with sacks, just making guys uncomfortable for a bit, making Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable for a bit, and trying to force him to throw the ball in the tight windows and give you an opportunity to get your hands on it. Both their corners have been playing at a high level. Derek Stingley looks like he might be at worst the second best corner in the league and at best tied at first with Patrick Surtain at his best. I can see this game being ugly enough, at least early, for the Texans to feel like they can go blow for blow for this team in the second half. I just don't know if they'll have enough juice offensively to be able to bring it home.
I like that you brought up the man coverage thing because, like, when you watch, it's all third down. They're playing man coverage. And like you said, the Chiefs just get into their stacks, their bunches, and they run pick plays and they get guys open. I think two things that are working against Kansas City in that regard. One, Kansas City has already put it on tape, and I think D'Amico Ryans is going to have something different. Like, if you listen to D'Amico Ryans' press conference this week, he's like, that game doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. We're going to be ready to attack what this team does. Doesn't matter that we haven't seen them with their full complement of receivers yet either. I think he's going to have a different plan. And the other thing is, no, Foley wasn't in that game. They were missing their starting defensive tackle. Aziz wasn't in that game. They were missing the heart and soul of their defense, and the guy that wears the green dot, the guy that gets everyone organized before the snap. I think having those two guys back for this game makes a huge difference, especially against the Andy Reid offense, which is going to throw that window dressing before the snap. They don't run a lot of stuff on offense. It's all what they do before the snap. That's where you see a lot of the volume with Andy Reid's defense. And having Al-Shaair out there orchestrating the defense and getting everyone lined up, I think that's going to be a huge deal in this game. And I don't think they're going to get those free guys on third down. And I think Patrick Mahomes is going to have like that Mahomes magic to move the ball on this team and to score a lot of points on this team. Of course, my concern is the other side of the ball and Bobby Slowick. I'm not putting any faith in there. But again, CJ Stroud. And what we've seen, we haven't seen the Chiefs lose to like dominant quarterback performances. Like Joe Burrow was good against the Chiefs in 2021. Right? Yeah. He wasn't dominant. Tom Brady didn't have to be dominant in that Super Bowl because the whole team dominated that game. I don't think they need that out of CJ Stroud. They don't need 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. They need 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and maybe at most 1 interception. And I think he can do that.
So to me, I have a pick from this game as well. It's Mahomes going under his combined pass and rush yardage of 274.5. I don't think that necessarily means that they're in danger of losing this game. I just think that this game might look a little bit more like the Saints game on that Monday night game earlier in the season, where because Houston's going to be playing a bunch of quarters, trying to take away the RPO game, trying to make sure they have guys available for the quick passes, you might see a little bit more in the run game from Isaiah Pacheco. They might lean more on the interior of this offensive line. I wouldn't be surprised to see them really just try to lean on the run game and just staying on schedule and not do anything flashy or risk anything going wrong in this passing game. I don't expect to see this as a big Mahomes. I don't expect Mahomes to put up a big number in this game. I think that this will probably be another ugly win for Kansas City.
Yeah, I think their game plan will be what their game plan has mostly been. They're 30th in explosive plays this year. It's been methodical completions, move the ball down the field, long drives. And so I think that obviously is a way to negate the pass rush that the Texans have. Now, if you can be sticky in coverage and force them to hold on to the football, then I agree it could get ugly there. So there are reasons on paper. I'm with you. Those edge rushers versus the Chiefs offensive tackles. DeMeco Ryans in a one-off playoff game. That's a big deal. The explosive play thing I mentioned. The other side of the ball, I just can't get there. I hear you. It might not have to be awesome, but it's just Spags' pressure packages and blitz against what? I mean, the Texans haven't been able to pick up like stunts this year. And now you're going up against a defense that blitz at the 5th highest rate. CJ Stroud this year, 29th in success rate and EPA per pass play against the blitz. I just think they're going to have a tough time. I don't think they're going to be able to run the football efficiently. But our friend Anthony DeBundo in his gambling column on The Ringer pointed out that the Chiefs, when they're big favorites like this, have not covered this season. I think I forget how many in a row they lost, but this is a big number for a divisional round game where there are some things on paper in favor of the Texans. So I'm still taking the Chiefs. Minus 8.5. Honestly, this is sort of a mental thing I do when I have to pick a side. So I'm like, I could see it on paper. And then I look at this chair over here to my right and I picture watching that Texans offense in the second half of a close game. And I'm like, you know what? If the Texans are all over Mahomes, I can live with losing that. I don't want to lose being the guy. I don't want to lose with watching that Bobby Slowick offense this year. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs, but I like the case there, Ruiz. All right. Next game. Actually, let's take a break. We'll take a break. One more break, then we'll come back. We get to Saturday night, Commanders at the Lions. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Commanders at the Lions. This was 9.5, moved down. A little love for the Commanders, moved down to 8.5 before we started recording here. Diante, you have the case for the Washington football team. If it's just going to be Jaden Daniels and then we move on, so be it.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to enjoy this with me, you're going to have to do what you do when you enjoy any good movie. Suspend your disbelief. Let's act like the Lions offense versus the Commanders defense is a non-entity that's not even happening. We'll get to that part of the conversation when it's time to have that one. I'm focusing on the Commanders' offense against the Lions defense. And to me, the game plan is simple. Spread it out, stay spread out, pass it early, run it late. I think that that's your best way to try to cause problems for Detroit's defense. I think even as they're getting bodies back, I know that Alexander Zaloni was actually a big piece of why they were successful against the Vikings run game in week 18. They were able to get back into some of those under fronts, really load up the line of scrimmage. He was able to match up with tight ends as well. I think for me, if you're Cliff Kingsbury, you look at that tape and you look at the way the Lions want to play and you take your 12 personnel package and say, if it's not 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, all this is going in the garbage. I'm not going to give this defense an opportunity to get that close to the line of scrimmage, to load bodies up, to blitz me as often. And I think that that's been reflected in some of their personnel usage down the stretch of the year. Just like Baltimore, they had a late bye week. They come out of the bye week basically leaning more into their 11 personnel looks. 62% of their early down runs are coming out of 11 personnel. They're spending more time in the spread, and they've been 5th in early down rushing success rate in the last 4 weeks of the season. I think that their last game against the Bucs was a bad showing, at least on first downs, but a lot of that I think was Tampa Bay really selling out up front to make sure that they weren't giving up easy runs. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Detroit play the same way. I just think that when the Lions are on defense against spread looks, they're more willing to give you light boxes. They're more willing to play. They want to play a lot of man coverage. They're probably going to be selling out to take away the RPO game. That should leave some opportunity if you are going to run it for maybe Jaden Daniels to get some quick scrambles or some design runs. But I think the biggest thing is taking your chances to Terry McLaurin on early downs. If you get an opportunity to throw those screens the way they did effectively throughout the game in the wild card round, they should lean on that, whether it's Diame Brown or Terry McLaurin, trying to get the backside of the backfield for some cheap yardage. To me, I think that that's the best plan of action because the overall game plan is exactly what it was last week against the Bucs. They have to possess the ball. They have to have manageable 3rd and 4th down situations. And then that's when you can ask Jaden Daniels to be a superhero. I'm going to take his over 54.5 rushing yards because that's just the only way that they're going to be able to win this football game is with him as a design runner and as a scrambler. And that may be another edge as well. The Lions have given up the 14th most EPA on opponent quarterback scrambles so far this year. We know that's going to be a big part of the Commanders being successful on offense. So if I'm making this case and we're not going to act like Jared Goff and Jahmyr Gibbs and that Lions offensive line even exists for a moment, just live with me in this fantasy of Jaden Daniels putting up a Michael Vick, prime Cam Newton-esque performance as a runner and passer. And they're able to just at least go blow for blow long enough to maybe get a variance play to work out in their favor.
Michael Vick at Lambeau Field, right? Wasn't that a Saturday
Yep.
night game? I do love the possessions point, though. It's like the way they played that game against the Bucs. I mean, the Bucs were very good on offense. They made killer mistakes, and those were magnified because they only had 7 possessions. A normal NFL game, you're getting 11 possessions. If the Commanders weren't able to shrink that game and it went a little bit longer, the Bucs would have been, the way their offense was playing, in great position to win that game. So I love that point. I think they have to play the exact same way in this game. To your point here, I think they have to get a little crazy on 4th downs, maybe a fake punt here and there. Like, embrace what Diante is saying, which is that there's no defensive game plan that any of us, Dan Quinn, anybody can cook up where you're going to feel great about or even good about the Commanders defense against the Lions offense. So lean into the variance a little bit. Take some chances, see what you can do offensively, and see where you are at the end of the day. So I've got a prop from this one as well. I've got Terry McLaurin over 68.5 receiving yards in this game. I took the over on that one last week as well. You're going to get your one-on-ones against this Lions defense, and he is obviously their number one target. And I forgot one from Texans-Chiefs. I'm going over CJ Stroud 14.5 rushing yards. Usually we take the Mahomes ones. He scrambled a little bit last week. They're going to be blitzing him. Just give me 2 scrambles for 7.5 yards each, CJ Stroud, and we'll be in good shape. So CJ Stroud over 14.5 rushing yards. Terry McLaurin over 68.5 receiving yards. Ruiz, you look like you are thinking Lions blowout in this game, or is that not what your facial expression said?
I mean, I feel like we're all thinking that. I mean, I do agree with you guys on your points about how this game has to go for the Commanders to have a chance. I think they have to, we talked about it on the Sunday show, they have to utilize no huddle. I think they have to utilize tempo. They have to control the ball. They have to make this a 6-7 possession game. and make sure their offense, that's when they have the advantage. When their offense is on the field and Detroit's defense is on the field, make sure that's happening 40% or 60% of the time to Detroit's 40%. And it's a model that they've kind of followed throughout the season. Like when you think back to the Cincinnati game, they didn't really get a stop against Cincinnati. They just kind of outlasted them and played the possession game and just happened to have the ball last against Philadelphia in their second win. That's kind of how things went. I know there was like a miracle flurry at the end there, but they're really just outlasting some of these teams, which I think it's a good sign for Dan Quinn. Like, if you're not going to be dominant on defense, at least manage the game in a way that minimizes the impact your defense can have on the game.
Know your team. Yeah. For a defensive coach to acknowledge I'm with you. That is a good sign.
And they go for it on fourth. They've been doing it all season. So I think that kind of negates an edge Detroit has in most games they play because they're willing to go for it on fourth. Well, your opponent does this time too. And I think that might be how the game is decided. Whoever wins on fourth and short. And if you can turn that into that type of coin flip type of proposition, if you're Washington, that's a huge win for you. And that's the only way that I think they're going to win this.
That's basically the way the Packers played them. They just came out on the wrong end of it, right? In their matchups. They tried to be as aggressive as possible. They knew that they were going to have to win on those high variance downs, and they just came up a little bit short. But I think that you can probably borrow from some of that aggression in terms of play calling, some of that commitment to trying to maximize every possession. I just think that if you're Washington, because you're not as talented as Green Bay is offensively, you probably got to add the clock in as a more of a factor than maybe Matt LaFleur had to in their games. But if you're able to take from that, and we know that this Lions defense is vulnerable, week 18 notwithstanding, they've been vulnerable over the last month, 6 weeks of the season. There should be some opportunities there. They're just going to have to hit those high variance plays. And when they're playing at their best, that's exactly what they like to do.
My question is on the other side of the ball. We know that's a lost cause, but what is the best approach for them? Do you think it's playing a high variance game, maybe blitzing, maybe trying to sell out against the run and make Jared Goff beat you over the top and just hope that he throws you one? Because I don't think there's a way you could just play the run game honest and survive.
Get run all over. Yeah. No, I'm with you. Yeah. Like Goff, they throw downfield less than almost any team in the NFL, which surprised me a little bit when I was looking at it. But I'm with you. Like, a turnover goes a long way in this game. 2 turnovers go a long way in this game. Like, I wouldn't be that worried. It's not a field position game. Like, it doesn't matter if the Lions start at their own 30 or your 45. Obviously, it matters a little bit, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you're probably, if they want to methodically move the football down the field, they're going to be able to do that. So, I agree. And it's easy for me to say, like, play high variance, try to create a turnover. I don't know what buttons is that just blitzing? Is that certain types of coverages? Is that disguise where you feel like he's vulnerable when they're running all that play action and he whips his head around and now the picture looks different? Like, anything you can do on that end to get him to throw you on, that's what you got to do. It might not work, but I think that's how you have to play.
You have to do it because they're so much lighter up front than Detroit is. Yeah. If you just try to play your soft zone shells and set edges with the guys you have on the roster already, you're just going to get mowed down. There's no way that they're going to be able to manage the down and distance situation. And when the Lions are able to operate that way against defenses, that is when it opens up all the cascading effects of what Ben Johnson does best. That's where you get the play action plays, and then you get a play action screen. And now you're able to push the ball downfield on those design shots because you're capturing guys' eyes in all these different directions. You've just got to sell out. It's not that it worked for Brian Flores in their matchups when they've played the Lions, but you've got to look at that and say, another defense that's lighter up front, that likes to play aggressively, that knows they're at a disadvantage in terms of their defensive line versus Detroit's offensive line. Just sell out and send bodies from everywhere. You're not going to stop what they do schematically. The only way to bother this offense is to bother the quarterback. And for all of Jared Goff's growth as a passer and as a processor and decision maker, you can still make him uncomfortable because you know he is not going to evade pressure if you can get an unblocked rusher. It's just going to be about timing it up right where it's not part of his progression and he can just dump the ball off quickly to Amon-Ra St. Brown underneath.
Yeah, I'm with you. Now let me ask you this question. Let's say I told you right now, one of these big underdogs is winning outright this weekend, and you have to pick one. Let's say this isn't actually what we're doing. Let's say you get 10 points for the picks contest. You don't actually, hypothetical. So you can go with the Texans against the Chiefs. You can go with the Commanders against the Lions, or you can go with the Rams against the Eagles, who I'm going to make the case for here in a moment. I'll tell you right now, because I sprung that on you. My choice is the Commanders over the Lions. I think there's a scenario where they can at least score. They can have a game where they do not punt the entire game. And then if you get one break on special teams, one takeaway, then maybe you can go to Detroit and steal that game. So if I had to pick one of the three, I'm going with Washington.
I'm gonna regret this, and it's gonna be dumb. I'm gonna go with the Texans pulling the upset. I think
it. You're in on it.
Like I don't think they're gonna win. I think the Chiefs are gonna win the football game. I think it's gonna be a competitive game though. But like the Eagles and Rams, I don't think the Rams stand a chance. I'm sorry, I'm already shooting you down, Sheil.
How dare you? Wait till after my argument.
I don't know what you could tell me. Like you kidnap the Eagles' offensive line, then maybe I'll go with you or something. That's the only way. And I hear you on the Commanders and Lions, and I understand that point, but we're also assuming that Washington is going to score a bunch of points. They almost have no margin for error on offense. I could see a scenario where they only score 15 points, 17 points, and it's just a blowout and it's not even competitive. So I'm going to go with the Texans. I think that could be a game that's like 20-17. I wouldn't be surprised if it's that like type of model of game.
Wow. All right, Diante, who do you got?
I'm with Steven. I think
unbelievable.
I think that for each of these games, I think that your general thought, right? And Sheil, I think that your process is right, that with spreads this big, you want to take the offense that has the highest potential to get hot, right? That can just score and go possession for possession with an opponent that they know is more talented than them. I just look at these matchups and I'm like, I actually want to swing in the other direction and say the most likely upset is going to come from the team that can make it the messiest. And I think that the Texans can make it the messiest in their game. They can get a batted pass that turns into an interception. You can get the Patrick Mahomes pressing unnecessarily on a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. And now you've got a chance to get a sack or a sack strip. And now maybe that just buys you the extra possession you need to keep things tight. I think that for the Commanders, they can play an A-plus game offensively and go out and score 21, 24 points because they're able to manage the game and shrink possessions. And then the Lions just score on all 5 of theirs. And the game ends 35-24. And there's really nothing that you can do except shrug your shoulders and say that football team is just better than ours. I think that the Texans can at least make it a little messy enough to where I can see that one going down to the wire and the Texans maybe being able to sneak a win out of that one.
If you take quarterbacks out of it, I think you can make the argument that the Texans' defensive line, and specifically those 2 edge rushers, are the most important and most significant game planning piece of any team, from any team in the field right now. I think the only other argument you can make is the Eagles' offensive line.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I am taking the Commanders plus 8.5 in this game. Are you both on the Lions to cover that spread?
Ooh. I'm taking the Lions to cover this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Lions. I could see it. I could see it being like an 8-point game, 10-point game where it seems like the Commanders are in it, but they're not really in it. Like every time they cut it to 1, Detroit scores immediately and stretches it out.
Yeah. It's hard to see the case for the Commanders' defense.
Man.
We'll see.
And we're relying on Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury. I think that can't be overlooked.
Oh my God. All right. Last game here. Rams at the Eagles. This one's on me. If you want a deep dive, check out the Ringers Philly special. Got to get my plug in. I am making the case for the Los Angeles Rams. Got to clear my throat here. Get ready. Get into character. You know, when the kids start acting, sometimes you relish these opportunities. All right. Did you not watch the Eagles passing game last week? 121 net passing yards. Jalen Hurts had the worst success rate for any quarterback whose team won a playoff game in the last 10 years. A.J. Brown was reading a book on the sideline, and now you're telling me this team has no chance of losing? I don't think so. The scheme is unimaginative. Hurts is obsessed with not turning the football over. We being the Rams, so I'm going to speak as a Rams guy. I don't know who I am in the organization. We have a bunch of young bucks on our defensive line. We have a deep coverage menu where we can disguise before the snap. He's not going to know what's coming. We're going to load up against the run, and we're going to make them beat us with their passing game. Couple 3-and-outs early, first half of that game. All of a sudden, everyone at the link, the butt cheeks are clenching up. The tension's rising. It's not going to be a comfortable place to be. Offensively, You don't think that McVay and Stafford, no, this could be their last run together? Why do you think McVay sat everyone in week 18? It wasn't to win one playoff game. It was to go on a run. Everyone thinks, Fangio cooks McVay every time they play. Go back and look at that week 12 game. Rams posted the highest success rate of any offense against the Eagles this entire season. They had a fumble in the red zone. They had a missed field goal, and they scored 20 points. Those two things change. That's a 30-point game for the Los Angeles Rams. By the way, the most under-discussed injury in the divisional round is Nakobe Dean, the Eagles starting linebacker who is playing at a high level. And now the Eagles are facing a scheme and a play caller who loves to pick on linebackers. We've got the original microscope guy on this pod, and Stephen Ruiz. He's putting that right on Oren Burks and saying, we got you right where we want you, Oren Burks. So no Nakobe Dean. He wore the green dot. Someone else has to wear the green dot. We're running play action. We're using motion. We're going to put Oren Burks in a blender early and often in this playoff game. Finally, look at the head coach quarterback combo. Be honest, take a breath, go look at it. Who do you trust more? McVay, who's 8-4 in the playoffs? Stafford, who's trying to extend his football mortality one more week? No one's giving him a chance, but they're going to Philly and they're stealing this one. All right, how'd I do? I'm a little too comfortable getting into character, right? Like you could tell, I was enjoying that. I was enjoying it a little bit too much. I can't explain it.
He put on the wig earlier in the week or last week when he did his consulting firm video, and now he can't. He's got the acting bug. He can't.
I can't turn it off.
No. He's going to quit podcasting soon and quit covering the NFL so he can pursue acting. It was a compelling argument. But I'm not going with you on this one. And there's one simple reason. I feel like the biggest cheat code in football, everyone is like, it's having a quarterback on a rookie contract. It's play action. No, it's being able to run the football for 6 yards consistently on first down.
Whenever
I don't think the Rams can do anything to stop the Eagles. And if it's 2nd and 4 all day, I don't know what you do. It doesn't matter if the quarterback stinks and can't read out anything. He doesn't need to be able to. He could toss a drag route to Dallas Goedert. He'll stiff arm someone and run for 20 yards like he always does. Or he'll throw a deep ball to A.J. Brown and he'll come down with it like he always does. Or Devontae Smith will get open across the middle of the field like he always does. There's just too much talent, and there's not enough talent on the Rams side of the ball. They're a year or two away from being able to challenge an offensive line like this, no matter how promising that defensive line and pass rush looks right now. Sorry. I like the quarterback better for the Rams. I like the coach better for the Rams, but I'm not coming with you on this one.
Diante, did I make you a little nervous at least for this game?
I will say this. You made me think about it.
Okay.
I was going to say, as an Eagles fan, you pushed every button that makes me feel insecure about this matchup. You pushed every button that I've been nervous about. But I just think that Steven hit the nail on the head. What Saquon Barkley and this offensive line does to defenses, it requires a total personality change. You go and look at the coverage splits in terms of schemes for the Rams defense. Every week looks about the same, a mixture of this coverage here, maybe a little bit more quarters this week, a little bit more cover 2 this week. You look at the Eagles game, it's like 55% cover 3. Because what else are you going to do if you plan on stopping the run? You can't play light boxes with their defensive front. Their young guys do a really good job at applying pressure. And obviously have been playing at a very high level over the last month of the year, going into the playoffs and at their best, with knocking Minnesota out of the postseason. But I went back and you watched that film, and there are so many calls that Chris Sheil made and so many things they did in terms of pass rush plan that you kind of have to throw out. Because Philadelphia isn't an early down passing team. That's not how they want to operate. Now, if you are able to blitz enough to stop the run to get a couple second and longs or a couple second and passing situations, then I do think that Jalen Hurts can be had. I just think that the kind of defensive personality you have to take on in order to stop what the Eagles do offensively, the way you've got to sell out at the line of scrimmage does open up these huge mismatches on the outside for them to attack with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And we saw it when this passing game was scuffling in the middle of the season when they played on Sunday night. The offense was in just as bad a place in terms of the passing game then as it is now. And they were able to just connect with A.J. Brown. He had maybe his most efficient and productive day as a receiver this year, just working those one-on-ones against the Rams defensive backfield. It would take an all-time performance from Matt Stafford and Sean McVay against Vic Fangio when they were more effective, like you said, than I think they got credit for. I just don't think the ceiling is high enough on that offense for me to trust that they're going to be able to score enough to make Philadelphia uncomfortable, especially on the road.
In the second half of that game, too, we saw Chris Shula go to a lot of desperate blitzing against the run. Like, they couldn't stop the run. They had a lot of cover zero calls against the run in the second half, and guess what? It didn't work. So, like, you could say, like, we're going to sell out against the run, but you have to actually do it, and then you have to actually stop the run. And I don't think even if they decide to do that, I don't know if they're capable of stopping Saquon Barkley anyway, and this offensive line. I think but I do think it's got to be a weird game plan. Like, whether it's like rushing 3 or something, like, that's what I would do to kind of bring out the worst of Jalen Hurts as a pocket passer. I know the strategy in the past, at least last year, was to blitz him, to cover zero. Yeah. And I would go the other way now, because I think you can find schematic answers to beat cover zero. I think if you force the quarterback to hold on to the ball just by flooding coverage, like, there's only so much a coordinator can do at that point. I think it's on the quarterback to kind of make a play, whether it's with his legs or just buying time and throwing into tight windows. And we know those aren't the strengths of Jalen Hurts outside the pocket as a thrower. He's not the best thrower on the run, and he's not a guy that's going to pierce tight windows over the middle. He's going to be a runner. And if you have 8 guys dropping into coverage, you have more guys to chase after him when he does break the pocket.
Yeah, the numbers would back that up. I mean, he's better against the blitz than against 4 or fewer this year. He's way better against man coverage because of their talent there. But if you kind of sit back, play more he holds onto the football, more bad things have happened this year. I mean, a wild percentage of his dropbacks result in a throwaway, a sack, or a scramble this year. All right, I tried to make the case, but now I have to tell you what I actually think. And my third pick is Saquon Barkley, longest rush, over 18.5 yards. I mean, he had 250 some yards in the first game. And to Ruiz's point, they were doing everything they could, and it didn't matter. Looks like we're going to get some weather potentially in this game. A little snow in the forecast, 1 to 3 inches on Sunday afternoon. That's another thing that kind of goes in the Eagles' favor, I think, in this game where, this could be a just run the football type game. So that's my third pick, is Saquon Barkley, over 18.5 rushing yards. Did you guys, where are you guys at with your props? I did a bad, did everyone give 3 yet or no?
I have one from this game. I'm kind of using the same kind of strategy as you, but I'm going the other side with the other team. I'm going to go Kyren Williams over 17.5 run attempts. I think the Rams, their approach in this game is going to be to control the clock. Like you said, they had a high success rate on the ground. I think it was over 50% in the ground game.
Yeah.
That fumble killed their EPA average. So the numbers don't look good, but their success rate was good. And I think Sean McVay is going to try to run the ball, especially if there's weather.
All right. So, Diante, are you good? Have you given three?
Yeah,
three props?
I made all 3.
Okay, let's review our props here real quick. I was all over the place with those. I'll give you my 3. Terry McLaurin, over 68.5 receiving yards. CJ Stroud, over 14.5 rushing yards, and Saquon Barkley, longest rush, over 18.5 yards. Diante, what are yours?
My 3 are Jaden Daniels going over 54.5 rushing yards, Khalil Shakir going under 50.5 receiving yards, and Patrick Mahomes going under his combined pass and rush yards number of 274.5.
All right, Ruiz?
I have Josh Allen throwing at least 1 interception, the Texans plus 8.5, and Kyren Williams over 17.5 run attempts.
Okay. Are we all Eagles minus 6.5 in this game, or does anyone like the Rams with the points?
Nah, I'm going with the Eagles, yeah.
Okay.
Eagles 6.5, yeah.
Put that on the bulletin board. Fake actor I just made up. Show that to Sean McVay. They're all picking the Eagles here. All right, last thing here real quick. We did our playoff draft last week, and so a little update here. Diante, you've got 1 team left, which is the Baltimore Ravens, but who knows? They could go all the way. That is still potentially in play here. Ruiz, you've got 3 teams left, the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Rams. I've got 3 teams left, the Lions, the Eagles, and Commanders. So it's 3 points for me, 3 points for Ruiz, 1 point for Diante. If your team gets to the conference championship, you get 3 points. So a lot at stake this week. I'm sorry, 2 if you get to the conference championship, 3 if you get to the Super Bowl, and 5 if you win the Super Bowl. So it hasn't been decided yet. Diante, the Ravens could still take you home.
I love being backed into a corner where now I've got to be married to my take all the way to the bitter end. I had a feeling when I picked two NFC North teams that the chances were that both of them could leave, could have their season ended in the wild card round. So it's rough for me. I'm just glad that I've got maybe the most talented depth chart that's still available. Arguably, or one of the top two, depending on how you feel about Philadelphia. But I'm going to be riding Lamar Jackson to the bitter end.
I was going to say I set Diante up for failure by picking the third pick in the draft, but really Sheil did it by taking the second pick and sticking Diante with the first pick. Because anyway, anyone who got stuck with the first pick was going to have the Ravens or one of these favorites and then nobody else, a bunch of junk.
Right.
It's true. There were 5 teams with very good Super Bowl odds, and we took them with the first 5 picks. Listen, had to be strategic, So that's what we ended up there. All right, thank you to Stephen Ruiz. Thank you to Diante Lee. We are going live on YouTube Saturday night. Ringer NFL on YouTube. We had a lot of fun last week going live right after the game, so we said, why not do that again? Who knows? Well, Commanders Lions, I'm telling you, keep your eyes out. That's Saturday night, and who knows in the previous game? These guys are loving the Texans' chances against the Kansas City Chiefs. So we will talk about those 2 games on Saturday night. So be sure to check that out on YouTube Live. You can watch it the next day, or of course you can listen to it on Spotify after that. And then we will of course do our usual show on Sunday night after Eagles, Rams, and of course after Bills, Ravens. That one won't be live, but that will be on Spotify after the fact, or you can watch it on FanDuel TV. All right. Thank you to Diante Lee. Thank you to Stephen Ruiz. Thank you to Christopher Sutton for producing. Additional production supervision by Dan Comer, Arjuna Ramgopal, and Conor Nevins. We will talk to you Saturday night on the Ringer NFL Show.